So we are here at Cryptofest, and I'm standing here at the moment with James Caw, founder and Bitcoin strategist at Simple Bitcoin, who just led a panel discussing the adoption of cryptocurrency as a strategic reserve within various countries across the world. Now, James, as you spoke about, you guys specifically focused about, Bitcoin and Ethereum's potential position as a strategic reserve for countries. Now, in your viewpoint, what's the real world conditions that would need to exist before nation state officially adds digital assets to its reserve?
So, thanks. I think the one component, of course, is that nation states take a long time to change their laws. And so the regulatory environment is just not there yet in many aspects. But we are seeing that changing in the US. In fact, the Donald Trump's initial executive order, is being rolled out a lot faster than we expected. And so even this week we saw another announcement on that front. So we're starting to see the regulations in the US coming to the fore, which is very important. So nation states first need the right rules of engagement. And so that's step one. And then, obviously, we need a proper understanding to know what we need to put in those reserves, which is obviously what we were talking about today.
Absolutely fantastic. Now, from that point of view, we've also, the majority of the conversations taking place today as well was from a standpoint of institutional adoption. And, institutional adoption is accelerating globally for corporate treasuries in Africa specifically. What would be the biggest risk and biggest advantage of holding, Bitcoin or Ethereum on their balance sheets?
As to the Ethereum component, I'm not qualified to speak. I see a lot of risk in a proof of stake coin, but really it does come down to firstly understanding what assets you're talking about. Custody is probably the largest component of holding a reserve, because you've got to build something that's durable for generations and secured by enough security that it can't get hacked or stolen. You've got a lot of responsibility in your security and your custody strategy that really needs to be implemented correctly. But that said, we have international precedent now on how to do that effectively. So those are your two main things. The one thing we can't control, even on a proof of work coin like Bitcoin, which is enforced by serious amounts of energy, is the price of that asset and a tax on price. So like we saw, in the last cycle, we saw FTX selling other people's Bitcoin into the market in order to manipulate the price to achieve their short that they had on the asset. And they didn't achieve that, and hence everything went to the dogs. And so navigating that and having an understanding that the price volatility is something to navigate is probably the risk that a nation state will have to first come to grips with before they start allocating to the asset. And then obviously there's the issue of how you procure that Bitcoin, which is quite important to take into account.
Now, taking what you just stated, if Bitcoin and Ethereum would become part of a global reserve strategy, if we can put it in such a way, how do you see this shifting geopolitical power dynamics over the next decade? Could digital assets realistically reduce reliance on traditional currency reserves like the US dollar?
Yeah, that's where we were mentioning the game theory of Bitcoin adoption. And the long and short of it is there comes a time when, and you can look at Ferdinand Maas and his Austrian economic point of view, where the hardest money in any society wins out. And at that point, nobody wants the dollar any longer. We've seen this happen next door in Zimbabwe. where the currency got devalued so rapidly that nobody wanted Zimbabwean dollars. Venezuela, internationally, we've seen this play out again and again. They wanted the US dollar at this point. As Bitcoin is a harder, stronger, and more reliable money, the game theory states that we'll get to a point where we don't really care what the dollar price is of Bitcoin. What we really want is more Satoshis. So it may take 100 years or 30 years. We don't really know. But unless there's an attack, like Carl was mentioning, and he's got some really interesting ideas there. If Bitcoin remains the hardest money and the protocol stays as it is, the chance of it becoming the default money of the world grows higher and higher. So yes, there's that point where you don't really care what the dollar price is because you don't want dollars, you want Bitcoin.
Absolutely fantastic. So, as we are potentially moving into a new era where digital assets can form part of nations' strategic reserves, maybe it's time for you to start reassessing your strategy of exactly how your portfolio is looking. And, if nations are starting to consider it, shouldn't you? I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much.